Some of the loudest fringe minority voices are saying unbelievably vile things in the last 24 hours about the assassination of our friend Charlie Kirk. America has a choice to make. Are we going to continue normalizing evil and letting it reign supreme? Or are we going to seek actual unity in the truth that we are one nation under God? Let's cover it all today on The Isabel Brown Show. Any human being with a heart and remotely in touch with their soul today is all grieving the loss of Charlie Kirk, even many of the people who vehemently disagreed with him throughout their lifetime. But there is this weird, scary, growing contingency of radical voices that at this point, 6 days out, is openly gleeful about and celebrating Charlie's death. And for the record, this is really hard for me to talk about. I almost very much did not want to do this episode today, but as hard as it is, I think it is really important for us to identify this lunatic behavior now before it starts becoming more mainstream and to call it out for exactly what it is. I want to preface our show today by saying I don't want us to talk about any of this to discourage you or to purposefully go negative. To the contrary, actually. Because I think our coverage up to this point has been focused on the wild, positive, beyond our wildest expectations outpouring of love that we are seeing in the wake of Charlie's death. The religious revival, the commitment to conservative values, a resurgence of free speech, and the courage that we're seeing from young people all over the world. So when we talk about this today, rather, I want us to do this because there is this undertow of growing sentiment that the increased calls for violence this week in the wake of an assassination for someone on the right, arguably the leader of the young right, these increased calls for violence are coming from the right. We need to squash this idea now, immediately, yesterday, really, and defeat these lies with truth so that we can have a remote chance in hell at uniting this great nation in honor of our beautiful friend. Last night, I got through an incredibly long workday, and I was doing my homework for school because, I'm a glutton for punishment, and finished my quiz on the virtues and vices, particularly the cardinal virtues. And I was really enjoying it, thinking, wow, this is so applicable to everything that we're studying today. And then, almost as if I needed a parallel to my quiz on virtues for school, I see the epitome of vices take place when my husband across the room in our living room was watching yesterday's episode of Piers Morgan that had quite the cast of characters featuring Jack Posobiec, Andrew Wilson, Anna Kasparian, and Destiny. Now, I had pretty much avoided all of the negativity from people like Destiny up to this point, and I'm glad that I did because I don't know that my mental state could have handled it in the first few days after Charlie's death. But this young man who champions himself as being a voice of reason and relative moderate behavior on the left was asked point blank by Piers Morgan on the panel yesterday, do you think your response to Charlie's death has been appropriate? Let's hear what he has to say.
Destiny, you've been quite active on social media since Charlie Kirk's death. When Erica Kirk posted Charlie's coffin, you responded, she tagged him, brackets, crying face emojis. In response to Alina Haber's tweet ordering people to fly their flags at half-mast in memory of Charlie, you posted on X buying flags and poles just to fly them fully erect. And you then posted yesterday, ending every conservative debate call out I'd do in 2026 with don't dodge, bro. That's not what Charlie would have wanted. Do you think that your response to the cold-blooded murder of Charlie Kirk has been appropriate?
He said yes, by the way. Yes, it is appropriate, which he then has all of these caveats for of exactly why it's appropriate. But it's appropriate, Destiny, to say to every conservative you're ever going to talk to for the rest of the year, don't dodge the bullet. That's not what Charlie would have wanted. It's worse, by the way, on his own social media. It was quite temperate when he was a guest on someone else's show. On Destiny's own live stream, he actually said in the wake of Charlie's death that all conservatives who speak in public need to be afraid for our lives.
Out the crime statistics? not exactly like...
You need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events so that they look to their leadership to turn down the temperature. The issue is right now, they don't feel like there's any fear. Like, I don't know. It's like memes. It's just memes to everybody, I guess. I don't know, bro. I don't know. I don't care. I'm playing video games. Okay, I'm done today. I don't give a fuck.
Huh. You need all conservatives to be afraid of being killed for stating what we believe in, for fighting for our values. Values like the beauty of the family and belief in God and your ability to freely express your ideas, the things that Charlie believed in order to get your leadership to condemn violence. And I guess this was Destiny's whole crusade on Piers Morgan yesterday, that Donald Trump has not condemned political violence in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Donald Trump is the one calling for more violence in the wake of this. For the record, Donald Trump, to quote him directly in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, said this: "My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, ding, 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 including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, our law enforcement officers, and everyone else who brings order to our country." Here on the Isabel Brown Show, we are always interested in the pursuit of truth about everything. And frankly, while everyone's been pushing the latest TikTok wellness trend or magic green powder on social media, I've been asking myself on my health and wellness journey this year, why are we just trusting one-size-fits-all solutions with our health? Especially as a new mom and in breastfeeding my daughter, I can't afford to just put anything into my body and guess what my body needs anymore. That is why we are partnering this year with Jevity on the show. They're doing something radically different in the health and wellness space using actual science, which is really important to me as a scientist. They go through your at-home blood work to show you exactly what your body needs. No more randomly throwing money at random supplements or hoping that something works later on down the line. And this week, I don't know about you, but my health feels a whole lot more important in my life than ever before. Here's what sold me on Jevity. They create personalized supplement packs based on your specific body's needs and your specific blood work, not what some random influencer is selling you this week on TikTok. Their AI analyzes real results with real wellness experts, and they review everything together so that you can get a blueprint that's actually tailored to your body. We fight for truth in politics, in faith, and everything else here on the show, so why not demand it for our health too? If you're ready to stop guessing and start knowing about what your body needs, head to jevity.com/Isabel or visit the link in the show notes to learn more and get an exclusive discount. Choose Jevity because your health deserves better than whatever's trending on social media. And even though if you're a listener of mine, you might not realize who Destiny is, this is not just a random guy on the internet. This is a man who has literally 1 million plus people who follow him across platforms. And he's not just saying this about Charlie Kirk in the emotional aftermath of this horrific event just a week ago. He's starting to say this about anyone who remotely thinks or shares the same values as Charlie Kirk. Mehdi Hasan have some really crazy things said on the internet the last couple of days, but Destiny is taking things a step further, telling you that anyone who's remotely a conservative is actually a fascist on his social media. Look at this. Mehdi Hasan says Kirk supported an insurrection and overturning the election, blah, 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 all of the things that are just not remotely true, obviously. I was literally live streaming with Charlie Kirk on January 6th of 2021. I can tell you exactly what he said, and none of those things are true. And Mehdi Hasan says, if you don't want to call that fascist, what do you want to call it? And Destiny basically says they're almost getting it. They're almost there. They're almost starting to realize that literally every single one of these people is a fascist. This behavior is the most vile, disgusting, vitriolic language I ever could have imagined less than a week after Charlie Kirk was so violently taken from us. And rightfully so, it's getting the attention of all of the right people because this is going beyond the free speech, hate speech conversation. These are literally direct calls to incitement of violence. Elon Musk ended up tweeting about this, saying that Destiny deserves to serve time in prison for this. I don't think this jackass should be banned from the internet, but Amazon should stop paying him to incite murder. That's insane. Yeah. I think that's like a bare minimum line that we should not cross in society. Separately, incitement to murder and domestic terrorism are felony crimes. For that, he should go to prison. He can resume streaming when he has served his term. Sadly, he's not the only person talking like this on the internet, though. I also have a tendency to ignore this young man 99% of the time, but sometimes things slip between the cracks. Former member of the Young Turks, who has now just gone completely rogue as an independent anarchist left-wing streamer, Hasan Piker, has had this to say recently about people who think like Charlie Kirk.
Kill them. Kill those motherfuckers and murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their red capitalist bloods, dude.
Let the streets soak in their red capitalist blood. And it's not isolated to streamers or to content creators or podcasters or people who play video games for a living. It'd be nice, by the way, Destiny, to just be able to dissociate for all of us, to say, you know what, F it, I'm just playing video games for the rest of the day. But we're out here with the three-dimensional people who are completely devastated and heartbroken over what has happened this week. Even members of Congress have now taken to this type of language. Here's what Ilhan Omar had to say about Charlie's death.
This is the last question to you, Congresswoman. Dr. Monica Joy Cross says, how do we fix this? This is a persistent problem. Are there answers?
The answer is not to allow the hateful rhetoric to find the audience that it finds. I mean, one of Charlie's last tweets that I read was a video clip of him. I think in that clip he talked about you and said, Muslims are like bringing an ideology and teaming up with trans and like socialists.
Stop the hateful rhetoric. But then we're just going to keep saying all these things that aren't true to spur hate in your heart for people like Charlie Kirk and to put a fat target on his back and anyone remotely associated with him. What are we doing, honestly, as a society? But what's scary and why we need to talk about this today, and I, again, did not want to go negative for the show today, but why we need to talk about this is because these ideas are now seeping into the mainstream media. The more we allow them to fester under the surface before calling them out for the absolute BS that they are, the literal incitement to violence that they are, the more they seep through the cracks and enter the airwaves. The very first piece of mainstream media I saw after finding out that my friend had been brutally assassinated and shot in the neck was from MSNBC, who I personally will be leading the crusade from the FTC to remove their license to operate as a media organization because of many clips, but starting with just this one.
Talk to me about the environment in which a shooting like this happens.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize what you just emphasized, we don't know any of the full details of this. That we don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about this. But following up what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions. And I think that's the environment we're in, that people just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
Matt.
And that's the unfortunate environment we're in.
This is all a result of hate, hateful words, hateful actions, hateful thoughts. But you, Charlie Kirk, can't expect to say awful things and not have awful things happen to you, aka your assassination was justified. And by the way, it was probably not even a justified assassination. It was just a supporter of yours firing off a gun in celebration of the fact that you were on campus. It's not only MSNBC, CBS Mornings put the blame on Republicans as well this week.
As Tony mentioned, not everyone took to his words or his rhetoric. At times they were offensive to specific communities. But with that said, this is not the time to focus on that. We are focused on this tragedy. Speaking of this tragedy, is this a moment for your party to reflect on political violence? Is it a moment for us to think about the responsibility of our political leaders and their voices and what it does to the masses as they get lost in misinformation or disinformation that turns in and spills into political violence.
Do we really have to start with the caveat of this should be a moment of reflection for the Republican Party? Why? Why? Is it not repeatedly calling Charlie a fascist, a Nazi, Hitler youth captain, transphobic, homophobic, white supremacist that led us to this point in history? And it's not even isolated to American media. British media is taking this a further step in this most insane direction. They tried to do this with me when I did a radio interview with the Times London this week saying, well, you know, Charlie has a really complicated history of saying stuff like he didn't support the Civil Rights Act, not true, or he hated Martin Luther King Jr., also not true. But it gets even worse when you look at this coverage from ITV, directly comparing Charlie Kirk to David Duke, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, after he was dead.
Yeah. I'll say, can I just say something? I don't agree he was a Cicero for the TikTok age. I believe he was a David Duke for the TikTok age. And I have some degree...
Can you just remind us who David Duke
was? The former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. This was a very seriously deep... Now, this is by no means trying to justify his murder. Political violence is wrong at home. It is wrong abroad. It is wrong, and it's also wrong. Political violence must be condemned, as must be the propagandizing for political violence and the dehumanization of people. Charlie Kirk was somebody who was, I shiver, particularly for conservatives, when he's described as conservative, because he wasn't a conservative by any means whatsoever. He was quite clearly, comfortably, a supremacist. That if I was somebody who was going on television, I'm sure you wouldn't describe somebody who goes on TV and blames Jewish people for what he describes as the coarsening of Western culture, says things like the Equality Act or the Civil Rights Act or so was a mistake, says things like women shouldn't be entitled to abortions, etc., so on and so forth.
Very extreme things. I want you to carry on.
Please.
But he said those in a debate in a university and then received, you know, very vigorous debate back. So
Indeed.
What he would argue, and his supporters, is that is freedom of speech. He was wearing a T-shirt with freedom on it, which we hate when it's stopped in this country.
No, I agree with that. I am not here to justify or even contextualize his murder. I completely abhor political violence. I completely despise guns and gun violence too, whatsoever. He was outright on camera saying that, look, it's worthy of us, for the purpose of the Second Amendment or so, that a few people be murdered by guns or so, being murdered with guns or so over the course of a year is a worthy sacrifice for the Second Amendment. The problem is that those of us who speak from the position of empathy, where we come from, is the belief that it could be us one day. He never thought that it could be him, and he thought he was somewhat invincible, and sadly, it happened to him. And sadly, the very sort of people he's helped dehumanize or so, the minorities, the women, the Jewish people, so on and so forth, and now the exact same thing that he almost helped to legitimize for them has happened to him. It's sad, it's wrong, but he too, there's a moral lesson in here too, which is recognize your own vulnerability. Be more empathetic. Don't dehumanize people. Don't propagandize for people's murder. It could happen to you.
But isn't this...
Be more empathetic. Don't dehumanize people. But Charlie Kirk wasn't a conservative. He was a white supremacist. Be more empathetic. Don't dehumanize people. But Charlie Kirk supported the Second Amendment, so he was a worthy sacrifice for your precious gun rights. Be more empathetic. Don't dehumanize people. But, every single one of these clips, it's disgusting. And I think the really shocking part for people is that this is like it's becoming a mainstream conversation. This is not just in the deep recesses of the dark web while idiots like Destiny are live streaming video games and completely dissociating from reality. That was disgusting and depraved, but I kind of expect it. It's insane that on the internet you are allowed to say, let the streets run red with capitalist blood, murder all of these mother effers, a la Hasan Piker, not even a paraphrase, that's like a direct quote. That's ridiculous, but I kind of expect it. But we're now saying this on CBS, on MSNBC, on ITV, on BBC, on CNN. If we don't call this out for what it is now, which is a coordinated dehumanization campaign specifically inciting more violence against people, I fear that we've lost the battle already. We lose all hope of uniting our country, and we severely lose all hope in finding our common shared humanity in Western civilization again. And this matters, by the way. Again, didn't even really want to cover this because this actually makes me want to throw up thinking about my friend. But this matters because of the impact that platforms and the trusted experts and people that you listen to for guidance, that impact makes a difference on other people, on your audience. And it's time for us to do better. Especially those of you spewing out of both sides of your mouth saying, don't dehumanize people, have more empathy, don't propagandize, when you are the hallmark poster children of doing all three of those things. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Dehumanization campaigns against entire groups of people are nothing new to 2025, and it's worth asking, if you could go back in time and stop the Holocaust, would you? If you could rescue even just one person from the worst atrocities in human history, wouldn't you? Now, think about this. Every single day in America, more than 3,000 babies are aborted thanks to dehumanization campaigns, a lot like the one we're talking about today. Someday, history is going to look back on this chapter as a genocide of our children, because right now, 1 in every 4 pregnancies in America ends in abortion. But unlike the past, we can actually do something about this today. Preborn network clinics are on the front lines of this fight, meeting women in their darkest hour, loving them, and helping them to choose life every day. This year alone, more than 38,000 babies have already been rescued. And the ultrasound, that beautiful, simple moment when a mom sees her baby and makes her twice as likely to choose life, is the game changer. It literally doubles a baby's chance at life rather than being lost to the horrors of the abortion industry. I'll never forget seeing Isla on an ultrasound for the first time, and it changed my life forever. So let me ask you again, if you could save a life, would you? You can right now for just $28 when we can provide life-saving ultrasounds to moms in need. Go to preborn.com/Isabel. That's preborn.com/Isabel, or dial #250 and say the keyword baby. That is #250 on your phone with the word baby. Together, we can end this tragedy one mother and one baby at a time. Look, media fuels people. We've known this for the last decade or so, especially. And media and people in media, independent creators, we do have an obligation to constantly check in with ourselves about what message we're sending to the world. We do. When we don't, things get completely off the rails, people get radicalized, and this type of political violence becomes normalized for all of humanity, not even just for one particular side, although it is quite undoubtable that this is going in one particular direction in the year of our Lord 2025. New polling is going viral all over social media that 24% of very liberal people in our country think that it's okay to be happy about the death of someone they disagree with, compared to just 3% of very conservative people. 18% of liberals in this polling say that political violence can be justified to achieve political goals. 7% of conservatives say the same. That should be 0% across the board, and it's ridiculous that we even have to put that caveat in here. But JD Vance pointed out while hosting the Charlie Kirk show yesterday, and we'll come back to the positive coverage of that at the end of the show today, that people who are very liberal are 6 times more likely, 6, to support political violence as a justified means to an end than very conservative people. Again, this very concept, we're talking about the very fringes of the political spectrum. So it is a small-ish group of people, but still, it took one person to take the life of Charlie Kirk last week. One person being radicalized by this incessant propaganda campaign to dehumanize people who what? Fight for free speech? For marriage, for having children, for your ability to go to church and worship God. What we say has an impact in media, Our words matter. And before Destiny goes all, aren't you guys the party of free speech on me? Because that was his counter argument all day on Piers Morgan. Yes, we are the party of free speech. And we have the free speech to squash your entire evil ideology and worldview with goodness, too. We have the free speech to drag your insane, ridiculous dehumanization campaign out from under the darkness, to bring it into the light, and to publicly shame you for what it is. Because when we don't, ordinary people who don't have a platform, become completely radicalized as a result of our propaganda in the media. And I loop myself in with this. We all should loop ourselves in with our obligation in the media to acknowledge what we say matters. The message we're sending to people matters. Are we speaking life into people, or are we literally championing and normalizing death by violence to achieve clicks, followers, winning a presidential campaign? It's disgusting. Charlie, in May, had a chance to travel to the United Kingdom and debate with the Oxford Debate Union, which is a very prestigious debate society at the University of Oxford that's existed for literally hundreds upon hundreds of years. And it turns out one of the people that he debated was the president of the Oxford Union, a current student at Oxford, allegedly one of the brightest students in Britain, who sent in a group chat in the wake of Charlie's death, Charlie Kirk has been shot, let's effing go. LOL. This is someone who stood across a podium from Charlie mere months ago, in May of this year. And in response, remember how I said all of this insanity was being normalized when we don't call it out for what it is immediately? The Oxford Union doubled down. They refused to apologize. Here's what they had to say, now going viral all over social media. Sent out an email from the Oxford Union to say, yeah, we're not going to apologize for this. Our exact response is, though this young man's comments are abhorrent, they do not contravene the college policy on free speech or any other relevant policy. Therefore, no disciplinary action will be taken, the least of which would be to remove this person as the president of the debate society at arguably the most historically prestigious university in the world. And now the university has actually gone a step further to accuse anyone criticizing this young man of racism, because that makes perfect sense. If you don't like what he said, you're a racist. The Oxford Union says no individual should ever be attacked because of the color of their skin or the community that they come from. But of course, it's okay to celebrate being attacked, shot in the neck, brutally assassinated, if the community that you come from is a conservative one, is a Christian one, is one rooted in objective truth and what is good and true and beautiful in society. This is the same young man who now, by the way, has followed all of this up by saying anything on the political right across the entire world is a cancer that must be taken out of society by any means necessary. And I'm not ad-libbing there. Listen to this.
To effectively create change in the world we desire. And Side Prop will argue that at times there is simply nothing else that can be required other than violent retaliation. And this is a view I wholeheartedly agree with. The view that some institutions are too broken, too regressive, too oppressive to be reformed. Like cancers of our society, they must and they should be taken down by any means necessary.
This is a university student at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, who clearly has been radicalized by all of our rhetoric. It's unacceptable. And he's the president of the debate society. Our words and our media matters. All over Blue Sky, the left's new alternative to X, people have been posting all week stuff like this. I hope they do Joe Rogan next, J.K. Rowling next, do Trump next. Charlie Kirk is dead and has been for a few hours. Trump next, please. Praying hands emojis. Chaya Raikik, libs of TikTok, next. Charlie Kirk is dead. Yay! One less misogynist piece of shit on the planet. Do Trump next, not sorry. A teacher in Canada has been placed on leave in the Toronto area for forcing her 5th and 6th grade students, 10 and 11 years old, to repeatedly watch the video of Charlie being assassinated over and over and over and over again in her classroom, laughing, cheering, and celebrating it as a win against fascism. Ordinary people internalize these ideas. What we say matters. And I never in a million years thought I would be agreeing with Anna Kasparian, of all people, on how we handle this moving forward. But as she and Destiny were going back and forth, she starts to realize in real time on Piers Morgan yesterday, when you have a platform, you have an obligation to do what's right. Your impact matters. Here's what she had to say.
Destiny, let me
You have a huge audience of young men who listen to everything you have to say. So when it doesn't matter. You have a huge audience. And because of the fact that you have a huge audience, you have a responsibility to not turn... No, it hasn't. It hasn't been broken. I actually care about the country and want to bring people together. You do the opposite. You represent the worst of us, Destiny. You're embarrassing.
You should tell Donald Trump.
All right, let me ask...
There's a crossroads happening here, especially on the political left, where we're seeing a differentiation between those celebrating this violence, calling for more of it, and gleefully cheering in its wake, and those saying we have gone way too far. And it's time to actually unite as a country. And if we're serious, if we're about real unity in our country, it has to be grounded in dialogue. Later on in that episode, Anna says that democracy is literally contingent upon people talking to each other. And she's right. That doesn't mean that you have to agree on everything in order to live as neighbors. That actually would be totalitarianism in reality. So that's not what we're advocating for, actually. But it does mean that you have to give each other the space to freely work out these ideas, to go back and forth and banter on them, to play devil's advocate, to question things, or we literally don't live in a functional society. We can't. The problem with this rhetoric over the last 10 years or so is that when we've overused the words like Nazi, fascist, racist, literally Hitler, and everything else that they've been calling Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, people like myself, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, everyone here at the Daily Wire, and all of you who listen to our content, is that it does two things. Number one, it removes all meaning from those terms so that when actual Nazi behavior, actual white supremacist behavior is taking place, we can't recognize it for what it is anymore and stop it before it gets too strong. And number two, you radicalize an entire sect of the population who believes that you should be celebrating the brutal assassination of a friend, a champion of free speech, a beautiful husband, and father of two beautiful children. And that's the society that you want to live in. We have to say enough. And no one said enough better than JD Vance yesterday while hosting the Charlie Kirk show, calling for actual unity. In the last few months as a new mom, my sleep has been incredibly important to me as I navigate my health. You can take the Helix Sleep Quiz to get matched with your perfect mattress to improve your sleep. That only takes a few minutes on their website. Visit helixsleep.com/Isabel to get 25% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Isabel for 25% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name, The Isabel Brown Show, after checkout so that they know we sent you. Again, just visit helixsleep.com/Isabel for this exclusive offer. And I want us to bring home the episode today there, because in the wake of this courageous act from our Vice President of the United States, who selflessly gave his time from inside the White House to give honor to his friend, his brother, really, Charlie Kirk, and to speak the truth to the nation, to bring actual calls for unity together, half the internet and most of the mainstream media has people saying that JD Vance had calls for increasing violence in our country somehow, which of course is ridiculous. But I want us to walk through this for a few minutes because it's becoming incredibly clear to me in the less than a week, I reiterate, since Charlie Kirk was so brutally killed, America has a choice. We have a choice, and it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. It doesn't matter if you agree or vehemently disagree with the Charlie Kirks of the world. It doesn't matter if you voted for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It doesn't matter what political party you are registered to support. We have a choice between celebrating literal assassination gleefully on the internet, on the airwaves, on broadcast channels, and everywhere in between, or to start with a basic foundation of truth, which can lead to actual unity. JD Vance said this so beautifully yesterday, and truly, as a Christian especially, it just brought chills that we were saying this from inside the White House on the #1 podcast in the world from the mouth of the Vice President of the United States. That above all else, Charlie Kirk, when speaking truth, believed in one foundational truth. This one.
Now, I have heard many calls in the last few days for unity and for healing in the wake of Charlie's assassination. You have no idea how desperately I want that, how gratified I was when Democratic friends and even former Senate colleagues reached out to offer their condolences to me. I'm so thankful. And I know there are so many like them all across our great country. I am desperate to wrap my arms around them as we all unite to condemn political violence and the ideas that cause it. Psalm 133 tells us, "Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious ointment upon the head." Oh, how badly have I craved that precious ointment in recent days, and I believe we can have it. But first, we must tell the truth. It's the only way to honor Charlie, for what was he, if not a man who told the truth in every place, in every environment? Now, the most important truth Charlie told is this, that long ago a man, begotten, not made, came down from heaven, and by the Holy Spirit was incarnate of the Virgin Mary and became man. For our sake, he was crucified under Pontius Pilate and suffered death and was buried and rose again on the third day. Charlie believed, as I do, that all the truth he told flowed from that fundamental principle. I really do believe that we can come together in this country.
Chills all over again. I'm floored. I'm stunned in the best possible way that we have leadership in this country that has the courage to say Charlie believed this as I do. That every fundamental truth about the universe has to start with the fundamental truth that we are created by God. That we are subservient to something bigger than ourselves. That our nation has to be one nation under God. Never in my wildest dreams, I tweeted this last night, did I ever anticipate that the Vice President of the United States would have the courage, hosting the #1 podcast in the world, to recite the Nicene Creed from inside of the White House. But we're here because of the courage, one of the most important virtues of humanity, of a man named Charlie Kirk, who gave us that pathway in the conservative movement a decade and some change ago to lead us to where we are in 2025, which allows for real unity, by the way. Charlie was the poster child for going out into the crowds of people that no one said it was possible to change their mind from within, especially college students. The people that the media, political operatives, pollsters, all of the so-called experts on young people said will inherently always be foaming at the mouth radical leftists. The people who will always blindly associate with socialism, with left-wing propaganda in the media, and with godlessness, with running away from our identity in God. But Charlie saw an opportunity there, a chance to go to these forgotten groups of people akin to missionary status. I mean, I really do believe that. And try to change that culture from the inside out. That's why we've been calling this not just a conservative political movement for over a decade, but we've called this a culture war. Because we have been, undoubtedly, on the front lines of changing culture, the decisions people make in their day-to-day lives in and out. And the only fundamental way that you can change things globally, and when it comes to objective truth, is to accept the fact that we need God. Charlie's mission, as I said on the show earlier this week, didn't start out to be this moral, theological, religious-based movement. Faith really wasn't a part of Turning Point USA until quite recently in the organization's history. It used to be the principles of free speech, free markets, and limited government. But Charlie realized, just like all of us are starting to realize, even more rapidly after he's gone, that without God, we lack any sort of moral foundation for society whatsoever. And we're seeing that unfold in real time with some of these most loud, radical voices saying that we should be celebrating Charlie's death, saying that we should be mocking his beautiful wife and children for having the courage to address the nation just 2 days after he was taken from us, and saying that anyone who remotely espouses the same values Charlie does, which is like 99% of the country, by the way, who believes in free speech and the ability to have an honest conversation, those people should be afraid. Afraid when they give speeches, afraid when they go to class, afraid when they post on the internet, afraid when they go to their jobs. They should fear for their lives because they lack any sort of moral foundation in God. They lack the ability to see a common shared humanity in the person standing next to them because there is no higher connection that binds us all without God. When these people, when these monsters try to drag you into the pit of hell, the lowest of the lowest pits of hell, do not let them. And we as a society have a choice to make. People watching this on the left, you have a choice to make. Are you going to say enough? Like the Anna Kasparians of the world, even though we might not agree on everything, are you going to say enough? I don't want to associate with any sort of political movement that celebrates this type of innate destruction of humanity. Or are you going to be drugged to the pits of hell? JD Vance's message yesterday wasn't one of advancing violence. That's ridiculous in and of itself. But it also wasn't one of limiting unity. In fact, he desperately is yearning for unity. But unity has to start on a common shared moral foundation for a society operating in the same reality, just as like step one in this conversation. If we're serious about being a United States of America today, and something is incredibly wrong with the far left in this conversation in this first week. It might not always be that way. In fact, I pray and I hope and I am desperate for the fact that it won't always be this way. I am a believer, like Charlie was, that nobody is really too far gone to change their minds. And nothing would make me more ecstatic and joyful than if even Destiny and Hasan and all of these people that we referenced on the show decide to change their minds, repent, and walk the other direction tomorrow. But JD Vance is so eloquent in his description of this. He describes this so perfectly as to what got wrong in the past to get us to where we are today.
We can thank God that most Democrats don't share these attitudes, and I do, while acknowledging that something has gone very wrong with a lunatic fringe, a minority, but a growing and powerful minority on the far left. There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree.
JD's right. And he alludes to it there, but this is part of a much larger, deeper undercurrent that's been present in American politics for a long time. I'm thinking back even to Charlie and I's first event that we ever did when I was a college student, just a little TPUSA activist handing out buttons and stickers and bringing speakers to my campus like Charlie in February of 2018, when I was told from someone I worked with in student government via text message, Isabel is an effing Nazi. How many millions of Jews have to die before all Nazis deserve to be shot? That was 2018. This rhetoric is not new. It's not all of a sudden popping up. This has been programmed into people for a very, very long time. And it's not just rhetoric. A belief in violence has been programmed into people for a very, very long time, and that is wrong. Here's JD Vance on that.
But unity, real unity, can be found only after climbing the mountain of truth. And there are difficult truths we must confront in our country. One truth is that 24% of self-described, quote, very liberals believe it is acceptable to be happy about the death of a political opponent, while only 3% of self-described very conservatives agree. 3% is too many, of course. Another truth is that 26% of young liberals believe political violence is sometimes justified. And only 7% of young conservatives say the same. Again, too high a number. In a country of 330 million people, you can, of course, find one person of a given political persuasion justifying this or that or almost anything. But the data is clear. People on the left are much likelier to defend and celebrate political violence. This is not a both sides problem. If both sides have a problem, one side has a much bigger and malignant problem, and that is the truth we must be told. That problem has terrible consequences. The leader of our party, Donald J. Trump, escaped an assassin's bullet by less than an inch. Our House Majority Leader, Stephen Scalise, came within seconds of death by an assassin himself. And now, the most influential conservative activist in generations, our friend Charlie, has been murdered. This violence, it doesn't come from nowhere. Now, any political movement, violent or not violent, is a collection of forces. It's like a pyramid that stacks on top, one support on top of the other. That pyramid's got a foundation of donors, of activists, of journalists, now of social media influencers, and of course of politicians. Not every member of that pyramid would commit a murder. In fact, over 99%, I'm sure, would not. But by celebrating that murder, apologizing for it, and emphasizing not Charlie's innocence, but the fact that he said things some didn't like, even to the point of lying about what he actually said, many of these people are creating an environment where things like this are inevitably going to happen.
Of course they are. And this is what we've been saying. Ever since, I don't know, the 2015 election, a decade ago, when you overuse these words like Nazi or fascist or white supremacist or whatever, you lose all meaning of the word. So when it actually happens, you can't recognize it in front of your face, and or you radicalize people. You radicalize people into action. Action that is not new. Action that is not a one-off event that so tragically, brutally killed my friend a week ago, but is a clear, systematic pattern of behavior that we are seeing in our country, whether we want to admit it or not, whether the media is going to be honest about it or not. And they're not, because, you know, they're contributing to the problem, especially within this last week. It's only possible to have unity in our country, which we all desperately want. I want that more than anything. I want a society, and I'm actively fighting every day for a society that feels like what our parents described the day after 9/11 felt like. On September 12th, 2001, where it didn't matter what you looked like, who you voted for, what state you lived in, what country you immigrated from, what religion you practiced. Americans came together as one nation under God, but we can only have real unity with people who legitimately don't want you dead if you disagree with them. JD had some words on that front too.
Did you know that the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation, the groups who funded that disgusting article justifying Charlie's death, do you know they benefit from generous tax treatment? They are literally subsidized by you and me, the American taxpayer. And how do they reward us? By setting fire to the house built by the American family over 250 years. I'm desperate for our country to be united in condemnation of the actions and the ideas that killed my friend. I want it so badly that I will tell you a difficult truth. We can only have it with people who acknowledge that political violence is unacceptable, and when we work to dismantle the institutions that promote violence and terrorism in our own country.
It's time to take a look in the mirror, America. What are we paying for? What are we championing? What are we allowing to take place in front of our faces and have to accept it as tolerable in society? Are we okay making the choice to keep going down this path? Because God, I hope not. It is time to draw a line in the sand. And that's a difficult truth. That's a painful truth. But it's a truth that we have to acknowledge, not because we're just devastated by the death of our friend. You know what? I'm not even going to say death. I'm going to say brutal killing of our friend. Violent assassination of our friend. That's enough to spur us into action. But you might be watching this and you might vehemently disagree with every single thing Charlie said. You might not know him personally. You might feel like you know him personally because literally a billion people had him in their pocket through their screens over the last few years. So you might feel this obligation to act. But even if you disagreed with every single word that came out of Charlie Kirk's mouth during his all too short life, JD Vance eloquates this perfectly. We have a moral responsibility. We have an obligation to our fellow man to call out radical violence now, to drag this darkness out into the light and to squash it now.
But you have a role too. Civil society, Charlie understood this well, is not just something that flows from the government. It flows from each and every one of us. It flows from all of us. So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer. We don't believe in political violence, but we do believe in civility. And there is no civility in the celebration of political assassination. Get involved. Get involved. Get involved. It's the best way to honor Charlie's legacy. Start a chapter of TPUSA or get involved in the one that already exists. If you're older, volunteer for your local party, write an op-ed in your local paper, run for office. I can't promise you this is going to be easy. I can't promise you that all of us will avoid Charlie's fate. I can't promise you that I will avoid Charlie's fate. But the best way to honor him is to shine the light of truth like a torch in the very darkest places. Go do it. We owe it to our friend to ensure that his killer is not just prosecuted but punished. And the worst punishment is not the death penalty, but the knowledge that Charlie's mission continues after he's gone.
That hits home. The worst punishment for this is not the death penalty. The worst punishment for this is looking back 10 years from now and wondering why the hell we didn't do anything. Why we didn't make this choice now. Why we didn't draw the line in the sand now. Because the really tough truth is that this never had to happen. It didn't. This is a horrific act of violence that is not a standalone event, is not a random act of chance. This is a direct result of people's inaction to get involved and use their voices up until now. And if we stop fighting, if we get scared, if we don't use our voices, there's no guarantee, like JD just said, who might not escape the same tragic end as Charlie. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that to motivate you. Because what we've seen in the last few days has been a miracle. And I don't use that word lightly. What we're seeing around the world in demands for free speech, in demands for free religion and free expression of our faith, in demands for patriotism and subservience to God, in record church attendances and 32,000 plus requests to start Turning Point USA chapters on campus, that is miraculous. And it shows that humanity is not too far gone. Some people have been radicalized to the point of just unacceptability in society. And it's up to us to point the finger at that, as we did today, and to say enough. We are not going in that direction ever again. And it stops here. But now we actually have to go on offense ourselves. It's not enough to just go on defense and tell these lunatics that they are psychotic, which is step one. Step two, today and tomorrow, is to do something about it. To start a Turning Point USA chapter on your high school or college campus. As JD said, to write an op-ed in your local paper or run for office yourself. To get involved in a church community and start to make faith a priority in your life. If you're a member of the media, to stop participating in the disgusting behavior that is fueling only more rhetoric and fire in the flame of what we've seen in the last few days. Literally just this week. Total side note, I'm just going to go off on a tangent here for a second. Did a series of interviews with several people in the media, friendly and unfriendly outlets, because people wanted to talk about Charlie's legacy. And I worked with a reporter who I've worked with many, many times before. She's great. About Charlie's legacy and what it meant for young people. And literally the first line of this article turns into Isabel Brown and all of the people who supported Charlie Kirk, a far-right activist, a far-right blah, 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 blah. Later on in the article saying, well, only some people, though. Only some people say that the rhetoric that we've been swirling around for a while on the left contributed to Charlie's death. If you're a member of the media, enough. Be better. Operate in objective truth. And set out to actually seek facts and to accurately report those facts to the public in the future. But above all else, the call that I have, the opportunity that I have to invite you to today is to pray. Pray for our country. Pray for the radical conversion of the souls of these people spreading insane hatred and vile anger and violence on the internet, on social media, on America's airwaves, on our broadcast channels, in headlines, and everywhere in between. There's a lot of talk in our country in the last few weeks that prayer doesn't do anything, that thoughts and prayers mean nothing, especially in the wake of tragedies. But prayer should never be our last line of defense. Prayer should always be our first line of offense. Above all else this week, only one thing has really rung clear to me. This is not a battle anymore of right versus left. This is not a political fight between Republicans and Democrats or conservatives and liberals. This isn't even really, it is, but it's not in isolation, the battle between truth and fiction, between fantasy and reality. This is a spiritual battle that has gone on from the beginning of humanity, of good versus evil. And there are very evil forces at work in our society today trying to get us to go further. Don't let them. This might be controversial, but I think we should end the episode this way because we are in a fight against evil. We have a prayer in the Catholic Church and that the Christian community has been using for hundreds of years. That ironically was actually written by the last Pope Leo, asking for St. Michael the Archangel, one of the three archangels, to defend us in this battle against evil. We pray it every single Sunday after we leave Mass. St. Michael is my husband's confirmation saint, so we like to pray it a little bit more around here at our house to ask for a little bit of extra intercession in the midst of spiritual warfare that we deal with all the time. And I'd like to invite you to pray it with me today, because if we are serious about silencing the rhetoric of the Destinies and Hasans and all of the media personalities of the world trying to get this to get crazier, it has to start with acknowledging our fight between good and evil and asking for as much help as we can get in the process. So let's finish today's episode in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Don't let them ruin your soul. Have courage and draw the line in the sand today to say never again.